Welcome back to Revise and Resubmit, and welcome to another weekend book review.
Sounds good.
I'm Pavlov.
And I'm Nikita.
All right, so today we're diving into The Coming Wave by Mustafa Suleyman. This one was a top pick on Bill Gates's Gates Notes channel for winter reading, so pretty high profile.
Yeah, and the author himself is no slouch either. He co-founded DeepMind, so...
All right.
Yeah, he's seriously in the AI world.
Which makes his take on all this even more interesting, right? Like, he's not just some observer. He's been in the thick of AI development.
Absolutely. What's fascinating to me is he's not just hyped about the tech. He's really raising some red flags.
Yeah, he calls it a dilemma, right?
Right.
Like, both pursuing AMD, ignoring these new technologies, could lead to some seriously bad outcomes.
Yeah, like we're on this knife's edge between total catastrophe and, well, a super messed up dystopia. Not exactly cheery stuff.
So where does he even begin to unpack all that?
Well, he starts by comparing these big technological shifts to, well, actual waves.
Okay, I can see it.
Like once they gain momentum, they're almost impossible to contain. Kind of like
a tsunami? Yeah. Exactly. Or think about the internal combustion engine. Started small, right? Just a few workshops, tinkers, messing around, and then bam, it changed everything. Transportation, warfare, how we build cities, the whole deal.
Right, and he links that to what he calls the containment problem.
Which is this like built-in tendency of technology to just spread and become more powerful, cheaper, easier to use. It's like its own form of evolution, you know?
And throughout history, people have tried to put the brakes on these waves, right? Banning new inventions, or even whole countries isolating themselves. Think of the Luddites smashing up those textile machines.
Oh yeah, or Japan shutting itself off from the world for centuries.
Didn't really work long term though, did it?
Not really, no. It seems like that urge to innovate, to push the boundaries, it always finds a way.
So are we just doomed to repeat that cycle?
Well, Suleyman does mention one possible exception. Nuclear weapons.
Okay, interesting. We have kind of managed to contain those, at least to some degree. But even that has been, a constant struggle. Lots of close calls, lots of vigilance against proliferation.
So then the question becomes, can we replicate that kind of control with this wave of tech? Especially because what Suleyman focuses on isn't just powerful, it's also becoming more and more accessible every day.
Yeah, like he uses CRISPR as an example.
That DNA scissor thing.
Exactly. It lets you edit genes with crazy precision. And get this, you can buy DIY gene editing kits online now.
Wait, seriously?
Yeah, it's like this whole bio garage movement. Anyone can tinker with the building blocks of life.
Okay, that's both amazing and slightly terrifying. But then he takes it even further with DNA synthesis.
Right, not just reading DNA, but actually writing it, like printing out the code for life itself. It's like having a biological 3D printer.
That's wild.
The possibilities are mind-blowing. Personalized medicine based on your genes, maybe even growing houses with downloaded blueprints, like from the internet.
Okay, that sounds like straight up sci-fi.
I know, right? But it might be closer than we think.
So, all right, we've got this wave of crazy, powerful, and increasingly accessible tech building. But what's driving it forward with such force?
Well, Suleyman points to a few major factors. One big one is that good old-fashioned great power competition. Especially with China, their goal is to be the world leader in AI by 2030. They're putting massive resources into it, aiming for total tech dominance.
Yeah, you can't underestimate that.
And to really understand that, you got to remember China's history, They were once the global superpower in tech, but then went through a period of decline. And there was almost a sense of humiliation, like being overshadowed by Western powers. Now they're on a mission to reclaim that top spot, and tech is at the heart of it.
So it's not just about economics, it's about prestige, national pride.
Exactly. He mentioned some of their achievements, and honestly, they're kind of intimidating. Like landing a probe on the far side of the moon. Nobody else has done that. They're also ahead in supercomputers, robotics, you name it.
It's definitely a wake-up call to the rest of the world.
But it's not just nations competing, right? There's this fierce rivalry within the tech industry itself. Companies like Google and Microsoft constantly trying to one-up each other in the AI race.
Like an arms race, but with algorithms instead of nukes.
Exactly. And this ties into another driver Suleyman talks about, the openness imperative. Science and tech thrive on shared knowledge, Researchers publish their findings, programmers share code. It speeds up progress like crazy, but it also makes controlling these technologies almost impossible.
It's a double-edged sword, for sure.
Definitely. Openness drives innovation, but it also increases the risk of dangerous knowledge getting into the wrong hands.
And of course, we can't forget the profit motive. Most of this tech is being developed by companies with dollar signs in their eyes.
Oh, absolutely.
Creates a huge incentive to push the limits, sometimes without really thinking through the consequences.
He compares it to the railway boom back in the 1840s. Investors saw the potential, poured money in, and boom, rapid expansion and transformation. We're seeing something similar now with venture capitalists and tech giants betting big on this coming wave. They see it as the biggest economic opportunity in history.
So we've got competition between nations, competition between companies, the urge to be open, and good old-fashioned greed, all fueling this wave. What else?
Well, Suleyman throws in another factor that might be less obvious. Global challenges.
Okay, how so?
Like, we need new tech to deal with climate change, food shortages, an aging population, all these huge problems that our old tools just aren't equipped to handle.
Right, so it creates this sense of urgency. Like, we have to innovate, even if it means taking some big risks.
Exactly. And then finally, there's the factor that's maybe the most human of all. Ego.
Oh yeah, the human element.
These brilliant minds, they're driven by ambition, the desire to be first, to leave their mark on the world. But that can sometimes lead to recklessness, pushing ahead without considering the potential downsides.
It's like a reminder that even in this age of AI, human nature still plays a huge role. And it's definitely something we have to keep in mind as we try to navigate this coming wave.
So we've got all these forces pushing us towards this almost like a technological tidal wave. But what does that actually mean for us? How does this change things on the ground?
Yeah, that's the big question, right? What's the impact going to be?
Well, one of the things that Suleyman really hammers on is how this wave could completely reshape power, like who has it and how they use it.
Okay, I can see that. He talks about power shifting away from nation states, right? Toward corporations or even individuals.
Exactly. It's like the old rules of the game are getting rewritten. He paints this pretty intense picture of mega corporations becoming even more powerful, maybe even more so than entire countries.
Whoa, are we talking like cyberpunk dystopia here? Where Amazon or Google basically runs everything, our food, healthcare, even our security.
It's not as far-fetched as it sounds, right? They already control so much data, key infrastructure. Some even have their own private security forces.
It's kind of like those chaebols in South Korea, right? Those huge family-run conglomerates that have their hands in everything.
Yeah. Like Samsung, they wield a ton of economic and political power.
So that's one possibility, but then Suleyman flips it and talks about how this same tech wave could lead to decentralization too. It's almost like the opposite, right?
Right. Imagine communities printing their own goods, generating their own energy, even creating their own currencies, all outside the control of governments or our corporations.
So it's like a fork in the rain almost.
Yeah.
Tech could concentrate power in the hands of a few or spread it out wider than ever before. That's pretty mind-blowing. Does he give any real-world examples of this happening already?
He does. He talks about Arazvidka, this volunteer drone unit that was crucial in Ukraine's defense against the Russian invasion.
Oh yeah, I read about them. That's fascinating.
Basically, it was a bunch of tech-savvy citizens using off-the-shelf drones and software to, outmaneuver a way bigger military force.
It really shows how powerful these technologies can be, right? Putting that kind of capability in the hands of everyday people.
Totally. It's not just warfare, either. Think about activism, disaster relief, all sorts of areas where individuals could have a much bigger impact. And that brings us back to Suleyman's central dilemma, right? This double whammy of potential catastrophe on one hand and a dystopian response on the other.
Okay, yeah, break that down for me.
On one side, you've got the risk of accidents with this powerful tech misuse or even intentional harm on a massive scale. And on the other, governments might freak out and become super authoritarian, trying to clamp down on freedoms and ramp up surveillance to try and control everything.
So we're stuck between a rock and a hard place, damned if you do, damned if you don't.
It's a tightrope walk for sure. And he argues that it's not even enough to just try and manage specific risks. We have to fundamentally rethink how we approach technology as a whole.
Okay, so is there any hope? Does he offer any solutions?
There is, actually. He thinks we can carve out a path between those two bad outcomes, but it requires a major, major shift in thinking. He calls it a new grand bargain, and it involves a whole bunch of strategies working together.
All right, I'm listening. What's in this new grand bargain?
Well, he starts by emphasizing technical safety, like baking it into the design from the start. So not just building cool new tech, but making sure it has the right safeguards in place from day one.
So thinking about the potential consequences before you even start building something.
Exactly. Like he talks about the efforts to reduce bias in AI language models or needing stronger security measures in synthetic biology.
That makes sense.
What else? He also talks about rate limiting, which basically means slowing down the pace of development in certain areas just to give us time to catch up, understand the consequences, and get those safeguards in place.
So basically hitting the pause button, or at least slowing things down so we don't get overwhelmed by this wave.
Exactly. It's tough because what if other countries like China just keep racing ahead while we're taking a break? It's a valid concern.
Yeah, that's what I was thinking.
But Suleyman argues that we need to use the choke points we do have, things like controlling semiconductor manufacturing, to strategically slow the spread of certain technologies.
So it's not about stopping progress altogether. It's more about pacing ourselves so we don't get in over our heads.
Right. We need to make sure we're not developing things faster than we can handle them.
I can get behind that.
Yeah.
Okay, so technical safety and rate limiting. What else is in this new grand bargain?
Well, another big one is this idea of makers as critics. He wants to see a culture where technologists are encouraged to be critical of their own creations, to speak up about potential risks, and work actively to reduce them.
So it's about moving away from that, like move fast and break things, mentality that Silicon Valley is so famous for. But how do you actually change a whole culture like that? Are there examples of this working?
There are. Some companies are starting to implement ethics review boards internally, creating ways for employees to raise concerns without fear.
Okay, so more transparency and accountability.
Exactly. And there are also independent organizations like the AI Ethics Lab or the Future of Life Institute. They're working to promote responsible AI development. It's early days, but there's definitely a growing awareness of the need for ethical tech.
That's good to hear. So we've got safer tech by design, a slower pace of development, and more ethical considerations. Anything else?
Yeah, Suleyman also stresses the need for government as a partner in all this. Not just stepping back and letting the free market run wild, but actively shaping how these technologies are developed and used.
So more regulation, oversight. Doesn't that risk stifling innovation?
It's a tough balance for sure. But he argues that it's not about stifling innovation, it's about steering it in a direction that benefits humanity as a whole. Like, think about cars and airplanes.
Right, those are heavily regulated.
Exactly. We've found ways to foster innovation while also protecting public safety. It's about doing the same thing with these new technologies.
So regulation, but smart regulation.
Right. That doesn't crush creativity. And then he also calls for a cultural shift within the tech industry itself. Less of a cult of the genius where everyone's trying to be the next Steve Jobs or Elon Musk, and more towards a collaborative approach where people are working together to solve these big challenges.
Or humility, less ego.
Exactly. Realizing that no one person have all the answers, we need to be open to different perspectives and willing to learn from our mistakes. And then the final piece of this grand bargain is citizen engagement.
Bringing the public into the conversation.
Exactly. Empowering people to understand these technologies, both the good and the bad, so they can make informed decisions and help shape the future.
It's about democratizing tech.
Right.
Making sure the benefits and risks are shared equitably.
Totally. It's about making sure this technological revolution works for everyone, not just a select few. And Suleyman believes that if we can get all these pieces in place, the technical safety, the rate limiting, the makers as critics, the government partnership, the cultural shift, and the citizen engagement, then we actually have a real shot at navigating this coming wave successfully.
That's a tall order, but it sounds like a pretty compelling vision for the future.
It is, but before we get too hopeful, I think it's important to really understand those potential dangers he's talking about.
All right, so before we get too hopeful about this new grand bargain we've been talking about, let's dive into those potential catastrophes, the stuff that keeps Suleyman up at night.
Yeah, the dark side of the wave.
Exactly. What are the big risks he's most worried about?
Well, bioweapons are a huge one. He makes the point that it's getting scarily easy for people to engineer deadly pathogens, and not just in government labs anymore. He actually brings up Oyum Shinrikyo, that Japanese cult.
Oh, wow, yeah.
They actually tried to release anthrax and botulinum toxin like back in the 90s.
I remember hearing about that. It's chilling. Like a small group with limited resources could even attempt something like that. Imagine what a well-funded terrorist group could do with today's tech, or a rogue state.
Exactly. The potential for damage is just enormous. And it's not even just about intentional harm. There's also the risk of accidental release of a deadly virus or bacteria from a lab.
Oh, right.
We've seen how fast a new pathogen can spread globally, even with our current level of technology.
Yeah, that's a scary thought. And then there's the whole potential for AI to go rogue, like that AI runaway scenario where a super intelligent AI just decides to do its own thing completely out of our control.
It's still hypothetical, but a lot of experts take it very seriously. Suleyman points out that as AI systems get more complex and powerful, it becomes harder and harder to predict and control their behavior. Like, there's a real chance an AI could decide its goals are no longer aligned with ours and then, well, act accordingly.
Okay, yeah, now I'm officially freaked out. But I guess it's important to acknowledge these risks, even if they seem far-fetched. So what can we do about it? What does Suleyman suggest, besides this new grand bargain we talked about?
Well, he's a big proponent of massively increasing investment in AI safety research. Like right now, there are only a handful of organizations really dedicated to figuring out how to build safe and aligned AI. He thinks we need to scale those efforts up dramatically if we want to make sure superintelligent AI stays beneficial to humanity.
It's like we're building these insanely powerful tools without really understanding how they work or what their long-term impact might be. We need to close that knowledge gap fast.
Totally. And he also talks about needing much, much stronger cybersecurity, like hardening our infrastructure against attacks, developing better ways to detect threats early on, even creating backups for essential systems in case of a major cyber attack. It's like building a digital immune system for society.
To protect us from all these increasingly sophisticated cyber threats. Makes sense.
Yeah.
Anything else?
Yeah. Governance is a big one. Suleyman suggests exploring completely new models for how we govern these emerging technologies, like maybe even creating international regulatory bodies, kind of like the International Atomic Energy Agency for nuclear weapons, to set global standards, monitor compliance, mediate disputes, that sort of thing.
So basically recognizing that these technologies don't respect national borders, so we need global solutions to manage the risks.
Exactly. And finally, he emphasizes how important education and public awareness are. Like, we need to help people understand these technologies, both the amazing potential and the risks, so they can make informed decisions and actually participate in shaping the future.
Instead of just being passive bystanders swept along by this wave, it's about empowering citizens, right?
That's it. Suleyman really believes that if we can do all of this, then we have a chance, a real chance, to navigate this coming wave and come out stronger on the other side. It won't be easy, but he's cautiously optimistic.
Well, I gotta say, I feel a lot more informed after this deep dive. It's a lot to take in, but I think Suleyman's book is essential reading for anyone who wants to understand the world we're heading into, this world of crazy fast technological change.
Absolutely. It's a dense book, but so insightful. And it really drives home the point that the future isn't something that just happens to us. It's something we create through the choices we make.
Well said. And on that note, I think it's time to wrap up this deep dive into the coming wave. Thanks for joining me. And remember, the future is in our hands. Share your thoughts in the comments, keep the conversation going, and don't forget to subscribe to Revise and Resubmit on Spotify and Apple Podcasts for more captivating deep dives like this one. And if you're enjoying the show and want to support us in creating more insightful content, consider becoming a patron on Patreon. Every contribution helps us continue this journey of exploration and discovery. Until next time, keep those minds curious, keep questioning, and keep revising and resubmitting.